canine German Shepherds find a black forest ranger chained to a tree. What they do next will leave you speechless. A team of elite canine German Shepherds was conducting a routine training exercise in the deep, snowy forests of Wyoming when something unimaginable happened. A momentary lapse in attention from their handler caused the dogs to veer off course. Guided purely by instinct and loyalty, they headed into the icy wilderness. Moments later, they discovered a scene that left everyone stunned. A man, barely conscious, bruised and bloodied, chained to a frozen tree. It was Dwayne Harris, the first black forest ranger in Bitter Creek, abandoned in the middle of the wilderness to die. But instead of running aimlessly or barking for help, these extraordinary dogs did something precise, courageous, and so moving that even the most seasoned officers were brought to tears. This isn't just a survival story. It's a powerful testament to trust, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and working dogs. It teaches us a valuable lesson. Sometimes the ones we think need us most are the ones who end up saving us. The snow fell thick, covering the mountains and ancient pine forests of Bitter Creek National Reserve, Wyoming. Winters in Bitter Creek are always harsh, with the landscape seeming fit only for the wild wolves and the strongest grizzly bears of North America. Amidst this snowy expanse, Dwayne Harris stood silently on a mountain ridge, his sharp eyes scanning the snow-covered forest. As the first and only black forest ranger in the history of Bitter Creek, Dwayne knew better than anyone that every step he took and every decision he made was watched with skeptical and biased eyes. It had been more than 20 years since he first stepped into Bitter Creek, and Dwayne still remembered the whispers and the wary looks when he entered the ranger's meeting room. But he had never let those prejudices stop him. Every day he worked with unwavering dedication to protect nature, proving that skin color was never a measure of a person's worth. Today, the cold was sharper than usual. A snowstorm was approaching, visibly swirling on the horizon. Dwayne exhaled a long breath, his white breath mingling with the biting cold air. He turned his gaze toward the K-9 training team preparing to leave under the command of Officer Jessica Vance, a close friend and rare ally who had always stood by his side in every situation. Jessica was tall, with light blonde hair neatly tied behind her head, her sharp eyes always closely monitoring every move the K-9s made. She raised her hand, giving a command with a clear, powerful voice. "Valor, lead the way." Valor, the renowned K-9, a former military dog with thick black and tan fur and keen eyes, immediately responded to Jessica's signal. Valor led the way, followed by 5 other highly trained German Shepherds, all of them prepared for complex missions under harsh weather conditions. The dogs quickly disappeared into the trees ahead, their steady footsteps gradually fading into the thick snow. Jessica checked her watch, pleased with Valor's speed and precision. But just moments later she furrowed her brow as the GPS signal on her screen began flickering before disappearing entirely. "What's happening?" Jessica asked loudly over the radio, her voice tinged with concern. "We're not sure, ma'am," a teammate quickly replied, trying to mask their confusion. The GPS signal for the entire K-9 team just went out. It could be due to the snowstorm interference. "We've lost track of Valor and the dogs." Jessica looked around, her face tense. She had never experienced anything like this in all her years working with K-9S. She immediately turned to Dwayne, their eyes meeting with mutual worry. "We have to find them immediately, Jessica," Dwayne said firmly, his voice calm but filled with unease. He felt a growing sense of dread deep inside, an unsettling intuition that something was terribly wrong. Jessica nodded quickly, signaling the team to prepare the snowmobiles. "We leave now. We can't lose the K-9 team in this weather. Valor has never lost signal like this before. Something strange is definitely going on." As the snowmobiles roared to life and sped toward the dark forest ahead, Dwayne could feel that today was no ordinary training session. He looked up at the dark sky that hung over Bitter Creek, silently hoping that the worst wouldn't happen to the canine team, their most loyal friends in this barren, frozen land. But at that moment, both Dwayne and Jessica had no idea that Valor and her team were heading straight toward a terrifying situation. A dark secret hidden deep within the forest. An evil plot had already been set in motion, and the first target would be none other than Dwayne Harris. When Dwayne opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was thick snow covering the old pine trees, the faint light filtering through the branches, created patchy, cold shadows. The sharp pain in his wrist made him realize he was chained, tightly bound to a large, rough tree. His weak breath formed clusters of white mist that quickly dissolved into the freezing air. His body ached, cold piercing deep into his bones, with dried blood on his temples, like fragments of memories that still lingered. Immediately, chaotic images flooded back. Dwayne remembered being ambushed. This wasn't a random attack. Everything had been meticulously planned, maliciously executed. Last night, as he had just left the ranger station for an unexpected patrol due to a suspicious gunfire report, the strangers had suddenly appeared. They emerged from the darkness like ghosts, all dressed in full black, their faces concealed behind cold ski masks, their eyes full of vicious malice. One, the tallest and most muscular, stepped forward and aimed a cold barrel directly at Dwayne's head, speaking in a hoarse, threatening voice. "Ranger Harris, you have two choices. 1. Cooperate and let us pass through the reserve to hunt and illegally harvest wood without interference. 2. Disappear forever from this place you never belonged." In that moment, Dwayne realized these attackers weren't just ordinary criminals. They knew exactly who he was, his position, and his patrol schedule. Clearly, someone from within had leaked information and betrayed him. A surge of anger mixed with bitterness rose within him, but Dwayne kept his gaze locked on the leader, responding with strength. "I will never sell out my honor. If you want to destroy Bitter Creek, I'd rather die than allow it." The leader shook his head in regret and signaled to his men. In an instant, Dwayne felt a sharp blow to the back of his head, knocking him down into the freezing snow. When he regained consciousness, he found himself chained to this tree, deep in the snow-covered wilderness. A remote place where no one could find him in such harsh weather. He tried to struggle free from the chains, but all he felt was the cold metal biting into his flesh, creating more bleeding wounds. Dwayne focused on staying calm and observing his surroundings for clues, but all he saw was a terrifying silence. He understood that he could only survive a few hours in this freezing cold. Clearly, they wanted him to die slowly and silently, to vanish without a trace. In his mind, Dwayne briefly pictured Jessica and the K9 team searching for him out there somewhere. He thought of Valor, his most loyal K9 companion, with his sharp eyes and extraordinary dedication. But even that faint hope began to fade as the darkness crept into his mind, his body growing weaker from the bone-chilling cold. In the fragile border between consciousness and delirium, one thought became clearer than ever in Dwayne's mind. Who had betrayed him within? Who had leaked the confidential information that allowed these men to strike so easily? And why had they chosen him, the first and only Black Ranger of Bitter Creek? He gritted his teeth, trying to endure the cold that was slowly suffocating him, and vowed to himself that if he survived, he would find the traitor behind it all. He would not let the truth be buried in the white snow, nor would he allow prejudice and injustice to win this brutal battle. But before he could uncover the truth, Before he could fulfill his vow, Dwayne knew he needed a miracle that at this moment, in the lonely snow-covered forest, could only come from his most loyal companions, Valor and the canine team. And in the eerie silence of the snow-covered woods, a faint, distant sound suddenly reached Dwayne's ears. The sound of footsteps gently crunching on the snow, almost imperceptible, yet enough to make his heart beat faster in his chest, reigniting a tiny spark of hope amidst the swirling snowstorm. The faint, distant sound grew closer, clearer in the silent space of the snowy forest. Dwayne struggled to open his eyes, which were growing blurry from the cold and exhaustion, concentrating all his remaining willpower to locate the source of this strange sound. In the bone-chilling cold, his mind started to panic, each breath short and desperate, rising in his chest. From the dim shadows between the tall, snow-covered trees, vague, dark figures began to become more distinct, silently moving toward him. The shapes appeared in the white snow with gentle, careful steps, their bright eyes filled with wild, mysterious intensity. Dwayne's heart skipped a beat in fear, his breath caught in his throat, as he realized that these figures were closing in on him, cautious yet decisive. Wolves, he thought quietly, his heart filled with despair. He had heard many stories about vicious wolf packs that often hunted in the harsh winter of Bitter Creek. Now, he had become the prey, chained to a tree, unable to defend himself in any way. He clenched his teeth, hopelessly thinking about the grim fate that awaited him. A larger animal suddenly approached, its cold, authoritative eyes seemingly piercing through his heart. Dwayne tried to stay silent, closing his eyes tightly, bracing himself for the worst. But instead of the sharp fangs he had imagined, the animal gently moved closer, its wet nose lightly brushing against his injured arm, sniffing deeply before freezing still. Dwayne slowly opened his eyes, stunned to recognize the familiar eyes before him, sharp, golden eyes but full of familiarity. Just a second later, his heart burst with emotion as he realized the animal before him wasn't a wild wolf but Valor, the elite canine dog from Jessica's team. "Valor," Dwayne whispered, his voice trembling with emotion and astonishment. Valor immediately sat down in front of Dwayne, his head held high with pride, his eyes bright with determination, as if reassuring his friend that he had been found and would not be abandoned again. The other dogs in the team quickly took their positions around the tree, each one acting with professionalism and precision like true soldiers. One dog quickly dug through the snow around the place where Dwayne was chained, while another stood guard, looking out into the deep woods, keeping watch for any potential danger. Dwayne, overwhelmed with both joy and emotion, felt warm tears running down his cold cheeks. He realized that the miracle he had been hoping for had truly happened. Valor had not only found him, but was also working smartly and skillfully to rescue him. Just minutes later, Valor suddenly lifted his head and barked loudly, the sound echoing clearly through the silent forest, like a signal to someone searching outside. In that moment, a familiar voice echoed from afar, full of worry and emotion. "Dwayne, Dwayne, where are you?" It was Jessica. Her voice pierced through the terrifying silence of the night, bringing Dwayne a surge of intense hope. He summoned all his remaining strength to respond, his voice hoarse and weak. "I'm here, Jessica. I'm here." The sound of hurried footsteps on the snow, followed by the beam of a flashlight cutting through the trees, revealed Jessica's face, rushing toward him with her teammates. When she saw Dwayne tightly bound to the tree in such a critical state, she froze for a moment, shock and anger flashing across her face. "My God, Dwayne, who did this to you?" Jessica rushed over, signaling her team to find a way to cut the chains. Valor stepped back but remained close, his eyes never leaving Dwayne for a second. They wanted me to help them hunt and illegally harvest wood, Jessica, Dwayne said, his breath short, trying to stay calm so he wouldn't pass out. They knew everything about me. There's definitely an insider. Jessica clenched her jaw, her eyes flashing with anger, as she fully grasped the dangerous and serious situation they were facing. She turned to her team, giving a strong command. We need to get him back to the station immediately. After that, I will find out who's behind this. I swear to you, Dwayne, I won't let this go. Dwayne weakly nodded, his heart full of gratitude and trust. In the embrace of his teammates, he felt the first warmth after hours of enduring the bitter cold. He looked up at Valor once more, clearly sensing the absolute loyalty and unconditional courage of this special K9. And in the determined eyes of Valor, Dwayne understood that this wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of a fierce battle against the betrayal and injustice that had silently crept into Bitter Creek. A battle they would have to win at all costs. As the faint light from Jessica's flashlight shone directly on Dwayne's pale face, she felt her heart tighten. His eyes, fading from exhaustion and the biting cold, still held a glimmer of trust, a belief that she would not abandon him in this freezing forest. Without hesitation, Jessica signaled for her team to act. Valor, as if understanding her intent, quickly stepped back, making room for her teammates to approach the chains. However, the dog did not rest. Valor immediately began digging through the thick snow around the tree where the heavy chains were holding Dwayne. Every movement was decisive, quick, and precise, as if he understood that every second counted in this race against death. In just a few short minutes, Valor unearthed the large lock buried deep in the snow. Without wasting any time, Jessica rushed forward and pulled a lock-picking tool from her rescue bag. The sound of metal grinding against metal echoed through the silent forest, but all attention was focused on the urgent task of rescuing Dwayne. Finally, with a sharp click, the lock popped open, and the heavy chains fell to the frozen snow. Immediately, Jessica and her team gently supported Dwayne, lowering him to the ground and quickly wrapping him in an emergency blanket to protect him from the harsh cold. Jessica looked deep into Dwayne's eyes, her voice filled with determination, yet unable to hide the pain in her words. "Hang in there, Dwayne. You're going to be fine. We're here with you." Dwayne managed a weak smile, trying to show his appreciation for Jessica's care and effort, though the pain still gnawed at his body. He glanced around, instinctively searching for Valor, feeling reassured as he saw the dog still by his side, ever the loyal protector. The rescue team quickly prepared to load Dwayne onto the snowmobile to take him back to the ranger station. But when Jessica ordered Valor to return to formation, the dog stood still, unmoving like a statue, his eyes never leaving Dwayne. Valor refused to leave the person he had just rescued, as if warning everyone that the danger was not yet over. Jessica approached gently, stroking Valor's thick fur, trying to convince him. "Valor, come on. Dwayne is safe now. We need to take him back to the station." But Valor remained motionless. His eyes stayed sharp, ears erect, nose continuously sniffing the cold air around him. Valor's behavior made Jessica realize that the dog sensed something they had yet to notice. Her heart skipped a beat in tension. "Wait!" Jessica immediately raised her hand, signaling her team to stop. "Everyone be quiet, something's not right." The atmosphere quickly became suffocatingly silent. Everyone held their breath and, after a few seconds, distant sounds echoed clearly, snowmobile engines and the flickering of flashlight beams cutting through the trees. A terrifying truth suddenly formed in Jessica's mind. The attackers had returned. They must have realized their attempt to eliminate Dwayne had failed, and now they were making sure to finish the job. Jessica quickly signaled for her team to prepare for defense, while Valor immediately positioned himself in front of Dwayne, his back straight, muscles taut, ready to fight to the end. In that tense moment, Dwayne looked at Valor with deep emotion, feeling the extraordinary courage and absolute loyalty of the dog. Valor, though silent, communicated more clearly through his actions than any words could express. The flashlight beams and engine noise grew closer, and Jessica quickly drew her gun from its holster, prepared to protect her teammate. But just as the rescue team was preparing for battle, a familiar voice called out from behind the light. "Jessica, Dwayne!" "It's me, Frank Dalton. Is everyone all right?" The flashlight illuminated the face of Sheriff Dalton, his expression stern but his eyes carrying an unusual hint. Dalton approached closer, glancing briefly at Dwayne and Valor. Valor immediately growled softly, his sharp eyes fixed on Dalton with hostility and suspicion. Jessica was momentarily surprised by the dog's fierce reaction, but she quickly realized something was off in Dalton's demeanor. His gaze held tension, unlike the genuine concern of someone who had just found a colleague in danger. Dalton looked directly into Dwayne's eyes, coldly asking a question that Jessica would never forget, his voice tinged with a mysterious regret. "You're lucky, Harris. No one should have been able to find you here in this storm." In that brief moment, both Dwayne and Jessica felt a chill run down their spines. Dalton, the leader they had once trusted, now seemed more mysterious and menacing than ever before. And Dwayne understood clearly that, despite being rescued, the real fight against the traitor was far from over. Amid the cold, dangerous night of Bitter Creek, Valor stood firm beside Dwayne, ready to fight and protect his teammate until his last breath. The dog understood that this mission was not over, and the greatest danger was still quietly waiting for them ahead. The faint, fluorescent light from the hospital ceiling was the first thing Dwayne saw when he woke up, causing him to furrow his brow in discomfort. The cold sensation of the snowy forest seemed to linger somewhere in his body, and the dull pain in his wrist and shoulder reminded him that the nightmare he had just lived through was all too real. Dwayne slowly turned his head to the side and immediately felt a wave of relief wash over his chest when he saw Valor lying beside his bed. The dog's sharp golden eyes were intently watching him, silently, but with a reassuring presence. Valor was still there, loyal and vigilant as always. Dwayne reached out, trying to ignore the pain, to gently stroke the dog's thick, soft fur. Valor pressed his face against Dwayne's hand, the familiar warmth soothing him, making him feel safer than he had in a long time. However, that brief moment of peace quickly vanished as the door to the room opened. The tall figure of Sheriff Frank Dalton stepped in, followed by the sound of heavy leather boots hitting the floor with each step. Dalton's face wore an expression of cold severity, his eyes quickly scanning the room before settling on Dwayne's pale face. Dalton stopped a short distance from the bed, arms crossed over his chest, his eyes narrowing in discomfort rather than showing any joy at the fact that his officer had survived. He spoke slowly, his voice tinged with an inexplicable frustration. "You're really lucky, Harris. No one's ever been left there and lived to tell the story." Dwayne immediately recognized the unusual coldness in Dalton's tone. He frowned, trying to sit up, his eyes searching. "What do you mean by that, Sheriff?" "Exactly where was I?" Dalton paused for a few seconds, seemingly considering how to respond. Finally, he sighed, his voice laced with reluctant admission. "The place you were chained up is in a secret area of the reserve. A place we stopped patrolling years ago, you know. No one's allowed in there except our own personnel. Whoever did this must have known every inch of this place, every patrol schedule. Dalton's unexpected and suspicious confession made Dwayne shiver. A terrifying thought began to form in his mind. If Dalton was telling the truth, it meant the perpetrator was likely someone from the inside, someone close and more familiar with the system than anyone else. Dwayne tried to stay calm, looking directly into Dalton's eyes to observe his reaction. "So, who do you think could be the traitor among us, Sheriff? Clearly, they wanted me dead to hide something bigger." Dalton glanced over at Valor, his face showing brief irritation as he noticed the dog still watching him closely. He replied slowly, his voice laced with anger and discomfort. "I don't know, Harris, but it seems you've pissed someone off. It's odd that they chose you. Don't you think this might have something to do with you? Someone like you, in our team, always seems to stir up trouble." Dwayne froze at Dalton's insinuating words. His heart tightened with pain from the subtle racial undertones in his statement. He had always known he was the first Black Forest Ranger at Bitter Creek, and that had led to quiet opposition and prejudice over the years. But now, hearing his superior imply that very thing, disappointment and bitterness flooded his heart. Before Dwayne could react, Valor suddenly sprang to his feet, emitting a low, threatening growl. His sharp eyes remained fixed on Dalton, making the sheriff instinctively take a step back. Dwayne placed a hand on Valor's back, gently calming his loyal dog. "Easy, Valor. We'll find the truth, we definitely will." Dalton shook his head in frustration, giving Valor one last wary glance before turning and walking toward the door. "You'd better rest up, Harris, and be careful next time, because you might not be so lucky." Dalton closed the door behind him, his footsteps fading, leaving Dwayne and Valor alone in the room, filled with suspicion and tension. Dwayne leaned back, his mind swirling with unanswered questions. Why did Dalton seem so irritated by his survival? Was the sheriff involved in this in some way? He looked deep into Valor's sharp eyes, sensing the concern and determination there. Dwayne understood that, from now on, he could trust no one completely, except Valor and Jessica. The battle to uncover the mole had just begun, and Dwayne knew it would be more dangerous and brutal than any challenge he had faced before. In the heavy silence, Dwayne softly spoke to Valor, as both a promise and a firm statement. "We won't give up. We'll find the truth, no matter the cost." Dalton's insinuations echoed in Dwayne's mind for days afterward, like a persistent, unsettling obsession. Deep inside, the suspicion toward the sheriff grew, like an unhealed, throbbing wound. Dwayne felt more certain than ever that something was terribly wrong within the Bitter Creek Ranger Station, and perhaps the person behind it all was someone he had once trusted completely. Frank Dalton. One cold afternoon, when the snowstorm finally began to subside, Jessica entered Dwayne's office, her face taut with tension. In her hands, she carried a thick file, her eyes filled with clear worry. "Dwayne, I think you need to see this immediately." Dwayne frowned, quickly standing up to take the file from Jessica's hands. He opened it quickly, scanning the pages inside, each word like a needle piercing his trust. It was a file detailing the granting of a logging company's permit, allowing them to operate freely in the very area where he had been abandoned to die. A place that had been classified as a top-secret zone, off-limits for years. And even more shocking, at the bottom of the page, was the unmistakable signature of Frank Dalton. Dwayne looked up at Jessica, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and pain. "Dalton signed the permit for them to enter Bitter Creek? This is absolutely unbelievable." Jessica clenched her fists, her eyes flashing with fury as she responded, "I checked thoroughly. This signature is definitely Dalton's. There's no way it could be a forgery unless he did it himself, or someone extremely close to him did it for him. But the strange thing is, when I asked Dalton about this file, he immediately got angry and tried to avoid it, refusing to allow any further investigation." Dwayne furrowed his brow, his anger boiling inside him. Until now, Dalton had always prided himself on his sense of responsibility and integrity. He had always portrayed himself as a protector of justice, someone ready to fight for the purity of Bitter Creek. But clearly, what they had just uncovered proved the opposite. Frank Dalton was not as simple as he appeared. "I never thought Dalton would be behind all of this," Dwayne said bitterly. "He's our leader, the one I used to respect." Jessica stepped closer, placing a hand on Dwayne's shoulder to reassure him. "I understand how you feel, Dwayne, but we can't let emotions cloud our judgment. Dalton is definitely hiding something much bigger. He signed off on these illegal documents, and that clearly shows that he's either directly or indirectly aiding these criminals." Before Dwayne could respond, Valor suddenly sprang to his feet from the corner of the room, growling lowly with a warning. The canine moved directly toward the office door, his entire body tense, his sharp, hostile eyes on full alert. A second later, the door opened, and the familiar figure of Dalton appeared in the doorway. Dalton paused, his face showing a flicker of surprise mixed with irritation when he saw both Jessica and Dwayne standing together, the suspicious file lying on the desk right in front of them. Valor continued growling, his cold gaze fixed on Dalton, an unspoken threat forcing the sheriff to step back. "What's going on here?" Dalton asked, attempting to keep his voice calm, though his eyes showed clear signs of wariness. Jessica quickly masked the tension on her face and responded smoothly, trying to probe Dalton's reaction. "We were just reviewing some old files, Sheriff. It seems we've issued a logging permit for a company in a restricted area. Could you explain this?" Dalton fell silent for a few seconds, his eyes shifting between Jessica and Dwayne, filled with suspicion, before he answered in a cold, evasive tone. "This has nothing to do with you two. I'll handle this issue myself, and I suggest you both stop investigating any further, understood?" Dwayne took a step forward, his eyes locked onto Dalton with a determined look, unafraid. "Why do you want us to stop the investigation? Is there something you're trying to hide from us, Sheriff?" Dalton glared at Dwayne, his face briefly filled with a mix of anger and confusion, before he quickly regained his composure, his voice turning cold with a clear warning. "Be careful with your accusations, Harris. Don't let the last incident get any worse." He turned and swiftly left the room, the door slamming shut behind him with anger. In the tense silence that followed, Valor moved closer to Dwayne, his eyes still fixed on the direction Dalton had left, as though offering a silent warning. Dwayne bent down to stroke Valor's head, feeling the tension that still hung over them all. He looked at Jessica, his eyes filled with determination. "We now know for sure Dalton is involved in this. But the more important question is, what is he trying to hide that's so big he's willing to risk his own officers' lives?" Jessica nodded silently, her eyes gleaming with a newfound, fierce resolve. Both of them understood that the real villain was still hiding very close to them, and the fight against that villain had only just begun. The sound of the door slamming shut from Dalton's angry footsteps echoed in Dwayne's mind for days afterward, leaving a heavy and oppressive atmosphere in the small room. The silence between Dwayne and Jessica felt like a terrifying confirmation that the person behind all of this was not only dangerous but also willing to take drastic measures to protect their dark secret. That night, the snow began to fall lightly outside the Bitter Creek Ranger Station. covering the already cold landscape with a thin layer of white. Dwayne and Jessica remained in the office, carefully going through every suspicious file and document. Valor, as usual, lay beside Dwayne's feet, his ears always alert, his body tense and ready to act at any moment. Suddenly, Valor jumped up, his body rigid, his sharp golden eyes wide open as if he had detected something unusual. Dwayne immediately took notice, quickly setting the file down and standing up, his voice low but full of alertness. "What's wrong, Valor?" Before he could wait for an answer, a small sound came from outside the window, like footsteps trying to approach stealthily. Valor immediately bolted toward the door, barking loudly as a strong, clear warning. Jessica quickly drew her gun from her side, her eyes tense, glancing at Dwayne with a meaningful look. Someone's trying to break into the station. Right after Jessica's words, the lights in the office suddenly flickered off, plunging the room into complete darkness. Dwayne reacted instantly, grabbing the flashlight beside him, its weak light barely illuminating the worried faces around him. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and at that moment the sound of a glass window shattering echoed loudly, followed by the silhouettes of two strangers dressed in black, their faces hidden, rushing into the room. "Down!" Jessica yelled, pulling Dwayne to the ground as a bullet zipped past their heads, embedding itself deep into the wall behind them. Without hesitation, Valor lunged at the closest attacker, his sharp teeth sinking deep into the man's arm, causing him to scream in pain and drop his weapon. Dwayne seized the opportunity, charging forward with all his strength to pin the intruder to the floor. They struggled violently, but in the end, Dwayne gained the upper hand with Valor's help, locking the man's neck in a firm, unyielding grip. Jessica quickly faced the second intruder, her voice commanding and firm. "Drop the gun now, or I'll be forced to shoot." The second intruder hesitated for a second before suddenly turning and fleeing into the darkness outside. Jessica tried to chase after him, but he quickly melted into the night, disappearing without a trace. Meanwhile, Dwayne continued to hold down the subdued intruder on the floor, the light from the flashlight illuminating his pale, twisted face, contorted in anger and pain. Dwayne clenched his teeth, looking straight into the man's eyes, questioning him with unwavering determination. "Who sent you to do this? Speak now." The criminal sneered, his eyes filled with hatred and defiance. He smirked, spitting out each word clearly, full of contempt and mockery. "You think this ends here, black boy? You're not strong enough to fight the ones protecting us. Sooner or later, you'll disappear too." His words hit Dwayne like a knife, stabbing into his pride and resolve. He struggled to keep his calm, though his anger burned inside him like an unquenchable flame. Valor stood beside him, growling continuously, his eyes locked onto the man on the ground, as if to make it clear that anyone who threatened Dwayne would pay the price. Jessica quickly entered the room, announcing with disappointment, "The other one got away, but he can't have gone far in this weather." She looked down at the subdued criminal, her voice cold and commanding. "Tell us who's behind this. Dalton, isn't it? What's he trying to hide that's so big he'd go so far as to kill his own men?" The criminal laughed cruelly, his voice as cold as ice. "You don't know anything. Dalton's just a small part of a much bigger plan. There are people with far more power who want this reserve, and they won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who stands in their way, especially a troublesome black ranger like you." Dwayne clenched his fist, but he knew this wasn't the time to lose his composure. He and Jessica exchanged a look, both understanding that they had just confronted a far larger, more dangerous conspiracy than they had initially imagined. Tonight's ambush was clear proof that the villains would stop at nothing. In the room, shrouded in cold darkness, Dwayne crouched down beside Valor, gently stroking the dog's thick fur. He knew that from this moment on their fight was no longer a personal one. It was a fight to protect the truth, justice, and the safety of Bitter Creek. And no matter how powerful or dangerous their enemies were, Dwayne was determined that he would never back down from the threats of racism and cruelty they had just faced. With Jessica and Valor by his side, his most loyal allies, he knew they were ready for the tough battle ahead. The cold, mocking warning from the criminal still haunted Dwayne's mind, a harsh reminder that his true enemy was hiding within the very place he had always considered his second home. But now, all his doubts pointed to one person, Frank Dalton, someone he had once seen as a colleague, a superior, even a friend. The next morning, as the first light of dawn broke through the thin veil of snow, Dwayne walked confidently into Sheriff Dalton's office, with Valor pacing alertly at his side. Jessica followed closely behind, her eyes resolute yet tense, ready to face the truth they had been avoiding for so long. Dalton was sitting at his desk, head bent over a stack of documents. But as soon as the office door swung open, he looked up, startled. His gaze swept across Dwayne's cold, impassive face, and then stopped on the menacing golden eyes of Valor. In that moment, Dwayne saw the fleeting unease in Dalton's eyes quickly replaced by anger and suspicion. "Harris? What the hell do you think you're doing?" Dalton barked, trying to maintain his usual air of authority, but his voice trembled slightly. Dwayne moved closer, slamming the forged file onto the desk. His eyes were sharp as he stared straight at Dalton, not hesitating for a second. "Explain yourself, Dalton. You're the one who signed the permit for those illegal loggers. You're the one who arranged for me to be taken out in that God-forsaken forest." Dalton paused for a few seconds, then suddenly laughed mockingly. His laugh echoed coldly, as if he had just heard an unbelievable joke. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowing with disdain as he looked at Dwayne. "You think you're so smart, Harris? I've known from the moment you walked in here that you'd be nothing but a nuisance, a black guy trying to play hero, thinking you could change Bitter Creek. Are you really that naive?" The coldness and racial undertones in Dalton's words cut deep into Dwayne's pride. But he kept his anger in check, maintaining a calm and strong voice. "Why are you doing this? We've stood side by side to protect this place. Why would you sell everything out?" Dalton stood up, his eyes growing cold with no trace of remorse. "Don't pretend to be moral with me, Harris. You've always gotten in my way since the day you stepped in here. Always hindering the plans that could make this place profitable. Who cares if a black ranger disappears? No one's looking for you except for that damned dog of yours." As he said this, Dalton's eyes flickered with hatred as he glanced at Valor. Dwayne could sense Valor becoming more tense, his sharp teeth bared in a warning. Dalton suddenly reached for his side, intending to pull a gun from his belt, but Valor was quicker than anyone in the room. In an instant, Valor lunged forward, sinking his teeth into Dalton's arm, making the gun drop to the floor with a loud thud. Jessica immediately stepped forward, picked up the gun, and aimed it at Dalton, her voice ice cold. "Stay right where you are, Sheriff. You're under arrest for aiding criminals, conspiring to kill a colleague, and abusing your power for personal gain." Dalton knelt, his face contorted with pain and rage, blood dripping from Valor's bite onto the floor. He ground his teeth, glaring up at Dwayne with eyes full of hatred and desperation. "You think this ends here, Harris? There are people much more powerful than me who want your head. You won't win this." Dwayne slowly stepped forward, looking down at Dalton with no pity. You're wrong, Dalton. You're the one who doesn't understand this place. Bitter Creek isn't a place where greed and betrayal can survive. No matter what happens, I'll never give up. Never. Jessica quickly signaled for the colleagues outside to come in, arrest Dalton, and take him away. The room fell into a tense silence as Dalton was led out, leaving Dwayne and Jessica standing face to face, shocked and bitter at the betrayal they had just witnessed. Dwayne sat down, his body feeling drained of all strength. He placed his hand on Valor's head, gently petting his loyal dog who had saved his life once again. Valor sat beside him, his eyes still alert, as if preparing for the next challenge. Jessica stood beside him, placing a hand on Dwayne's shoulder, speaking softly. "Now we know the truth, Dwayne. But this fight isn't over. Dalton is just one part of a much bigger, more dangerous network. We have to be careful from now on." Dwayne nodded, his gaze full of determination as he looked out the window, where the snow was still gently falling, covering up the traces of the betrayal and lies that had just unfolded. He knew that, from this moment on, the fight for justice in Bitter Creek would be far more intense. But he was also certain of one thing. He was not alone. With Jessica and Valor by his side, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The sound of Dalton being escorted away, the heavy footsteps of the officers echoing down the hall, did little to ease the uneasy feeling still weighing on Dwayne's chest. Though the traitor had been exposed, his instincts told him the real danger was still lurking out there somewhere, silent, ruthless, and yet to be discovered. Dwayne sighed, his gaze quietly drifting to Valor, the canine who lay peacefully at his feet. A small, long wound on Valor's front leg, the result of their recent confrontation, had been carefully bandaged. While the injury wasn't severe, every time he saw Valor wince slightly from pain, Dwayne's heart tightened with both sorrow and anger. He leaned down, gently stroking Valor's head, his voice a soft, sincere apology. "I'm really sorry, old friend. Because of me, you had to suffer like this." Valor looked up at Dwayne, his golden eyes still steadfast, still full of loyalty and absolute trust, just like the first time they had met. The dog nudged his head into Dwayne's hand, as if reassuring him that this small injury was nothing compared to all they had already endured together. Jessica stood nearby, quietly observing the touching scene. She softly approached and placed a steady hand on Dwayne's shoulder, her voice gentle yet filled with resolve. "Dwayne, don't blame yourself anymore. Valor understands. The most important thing now is that we need to keep fighting, because I'm sure Dalton isn't the mastermind. He's just a pawn in a much larger scheme." Dwayne looked up, meeting Jessica's determined gaze. He nodded slowly, knowing she was right. What they had just witnessed was only the tip of the iceberg. There were still many more hidden in the shadows, ready to destroy Bitter Creek and anyone who dared stand in their way. He stood up and walked slowly to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape that surrounded the ranger station. The snow still fell gently, each flake drifting down like it was meant to cover up all the secrets and stains that had unfolded here. But Dwayne knew, no matter how thick the snow fell, the truth would never be buried forever. "Jessica, who do you think could be behind Dalton?" Dwayne turned back, looking at her with a troubled expression. Jessica frowned, her eyes flashing with deep concern. "I'm not sure, but clearly, it has to be someone with a lot of power, someone who can manipulate Dalton. It could be someone within the local government or even higher up." Dwayne fell silent for a moment, his eyes darkening as he sank into thought. He knew that the battle ahead would be long and full of challenges, but he also knew he couldn't stop now. Valor had been hurt protecting him, and Jessica had always stood by his side through every danger. They had faced too many perils to give up now. "We need to investigate further," Dwayne said, his voice becoming steady and stronger than ever. "I can't let Bitter Creek fall into the hands of those who disrespect the law and human dignity like that. I will find them, Jessica." Jessica stepped closer to Dwayne, her eyes full of admiration and determination that was impossible to hide. "You'll never have to fight alone, Dwayne. You've got me, you've got Valor, and you've got the true allies who are silently standing by your side. We'll fight till the end, no matter how powerful the enemy may be." Dwayne looked deeply into Jessica's eyes, feeling the sincerity and strength radiating from her. He understood that although the wounds in his heart wouldn't heal immediately, it was their trust and unity that would help them overcome whatever difficulties lay ahead. At that moment, Valor stood up and gently walked over, standing close to Dwayne as if to show that he, too, was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The dog nuzzled Dwayne's leg once more, as if sending a clear message that, no matter what happened, they were still a team that would never be defeated by betrayal or injustice. Dwayne looked down at Valor, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You're always by my side, right, Valor? We'll find the truth, I promise you. I won't let you down." Jessica placed a hand on Valor's back, her gaze more resolute than ever. "Get ready, both of you. Our real battle has just begun." The cold, unsettling warning from the criminal still lingered in Dwayne's mind, like a constant reminder that his true enemy was still hiding within the very place he had always considered his second home. But now, all suspicions were focused on one person. Frank Dalton, someone he had once considered a colleague, a superior, even a friend. That evening, the sky above Bitter Creek was heavy with dark, gray clouds. The snow began to fall more heavily, covering the ranger station in a thick white blanket. Jessica stood by the office window, her gaze intently observing every slight movement outside. Dwayne sat nearby, flipping through the documents with intense focus. By his side, Valor lay still, but his ears were always erect, and his sharp golden eyes were alert to every small sound drifting in from the deep, dark night. Suddenly, Valor raised his head, growling softly in a suspicious manner. Dwayne immediately took notice, abandoning the papers and quickly standing up. "What's wrong, Valor?" Valor stood up, slowly moving toward the door, his sharp eyes focused on the snowstorm outside the window. Dwayne and Jessica exchanged a look filled with meaning, then both moved toward Valor. A strange instinct began to rise in them, a sense that danger was drawing near. Through the fogged window, Dwayne caught a glimpse of a figure standing quietly in the distance, near the snow-covered tree line. The person was dressed in a black coat, but the faint light reflected off a small metallic object on his chest. A police badge, clearly visible. Jessica whispered with tense urgency, "He's one of ours, Dwayne. Another officer. Unbelievable." Before Dwayne could process any further, Valor bolted out the door, ignoring the raging snowstorm. Dwayne and Jessica quickly followed, but the figure ahead swiftly turned and fled into the deep, dark woods. Valor chased relentlessly, his barks echoing loud and fierce, a powerful warning. The heavy snow and strong winds caused Dwayne and Jessica to fall behind, their feet nearly buried in the deep, freezing snow. But Valor, with extraordinary determination, raced ahead like a flash of lightning through the night, unwilling to let the suspect escape from his sight. But just minutes later, from the darkness, Valor returned, his expression one of frustration and disappointment. He stopped in front of Dwayne, breathing heavily, his eyes staring into the darkness as if to say that the suspect had vanished. Jessica gasped, her voice filled with frustration. "He got away, but he couldn't have gone far. He's definitely very familiar with this terrain. Dwayne stepped forward where Valor had stopped, using the flashlight to carefully scan the surrounding area. Immediately, he spotted a police badge half buried in the snow, faintly reflecting the weak light from the flashlight. His heart pounded as he recognized it. It was the official badge of the Bitter Creek Ranger Station. "Jessica, he really is one of ours," Dwayne said in a low, strained voice, his eyes darkening with tension. "The mole is still here, blending in with us, continuing to watch and threaten us from within." Jessica looked down at the badge in Dwayne's hand, her fist unconsciously clenching, her voice filled with anger and disbelief. "I can't believe it. One of the team we've always trusted could betray us so openly. This is even worse than Dalton." Dwayne stood tall, his gaze fixed on the thick, blinding snow outside, his heart heavy with anger and sadness. He knew that the most dangerous enemy was always the one hidden in the shadows, the one they had trusted completely. And now, that person was still quietly watching their every move. Valor stood beside Dwayne, gently nudging his head against his leg as if to reassure him, but the dog's eyes remained fixed on the direction where the stranger had disappeared. Dwayne bent down and stroked Valor's fur, silently thanking the loyal dog for not hesitating to protect him, despite the ever-present danger. Jessica walked up to Dwayne, her gaze filled with unwavering determination, her voice clear and strong amid the howling winds. "Dwayne, we can't let this continue. Someone is conspiring to undermine the ranger station from the inside, and we need to find out who they are before they can cause any more harm." Dwayne nodded slowly, gripping the police badge tightly in his hand, his voice filled with determination and strength. "You're right, Jessica. We need to put an end to this. The mole thinks they're safe hiding in the shadows, but they made a mistake when they decided to confront us. I won't let them hurt anyone else." Amid the blinding snowstorm, Dwayne looked deeply into Jessica's determined eyes and then at Valor, understanding that they were the only allies he could truly trust in the hard battle ahead. He knew that only by exposing the enemy hidden in the shadows could Bitter Creek ever truly be at peace again. And he swore to himself no matter what it took, he would not let the remaining traitor cause any more harm to those he loved or the land he had vowed to protect with his life. Dwayne's doubts weighed heavily on his mind, no longer just an instinct, but a clear and dangerous reality surrounding them. After the failed chase in the snowstorm, the ranger station had fallen into an atmosphere of tension and caution. Every member of the team could now be a threat, and they had no choice but to accept this painful truth in order to survive and prevail. On a gloomy afternoon, Dwayne and Jessica decided to head to the old, abandoned cabin deep in the Bitter Creek forest, where Dalton had once declared it unsafe and unused for years. But with their sharp investigative instincts, both knew it was the ideal place for the mole to hide or conceal criminal evidence. The small cabin appeared through the thick falling snow, its roof covered with snow, the rotting wood making it seem like the house was slowly blending into the harsh nature. Valor walked ahead, his sensitive nose sniffing the cold air, his body tense with alertness. Dwayne bent down and quickly noticed fresh, unfamiliar footprints leading directly to the cabin door. Jessica looked at him, her worry apparent, her hand already resting on her gun at her side, whispering with tension, "He was just here, Dwayne. We can't hesitate." Dwayne nodded, drawing his gun, and cautiously approached the cabin door. Valor moved close beside him, his breath still, fully focused. He pushed open the cabin door, the rusty hinges screeching loudly, echoing through the silent pine woods. Inside, the cabin was dim, with only a few weak rays of light filtering through the dusty window cracks. The moment Dwayne and Jessica stepped inside, a small noise came from the far corner of the room. In an instant, the shadow of a man sprang from the darkness, his cold, lethal eyes fixed on them, a gun already in hand. It was Luke Howey, the young deputy sheriff, who had always been close to Dalton and loyal to him. Luke aimed his gun directly at Dwayne, his voice trembling with tension and anger. "Stay where you are. You think you're so smart? You'll never understand everything we've done." Dwayne looked at Luke with rage, his voice low but full of strength. "Luke, you're making a huge mistake. Don't ruin yourself over a traitor like Dalton." Luke sneered, his eyes filled with fanaticism and despair. "Dalton is the only one who truly understands the value of this place. You're the real traitors, trying to ruin the good plans he's built over all these years." Before Dwayne could respond, Luke pulled the trigger. The sharp sound of the gunshot echoed throughout the cabin, but Valor was quick to leap forward, shielding Dwayne. The bullet lodged deep into the dog's shoulder, causing Valor to cry out in pain and collapse onto the floor, blood pouring from the wound. "Valor!" Dwayne screamed, his heart swelling with anger and pain. Without thinking, he charged at Luke, knocking him to the ground, Luke's gun flying out of his hand. The two struggled fiercely, Dwayne's powerful, furious punches landing on the traitor. Luke fought back desperately, but Dwayne's strength, fueled by his fury, completely overpowered him. Jessica rushed to Valor's side, but when she saw Luke trying to reach for the gun again, she immediately aimed her gun at him, her voice firm and commanding. "Don't move, Luke. Don't make me shoot you." Luke stopped, panting heavily, his eyes filled with despair and rage. "You don't understand. This goes far beyond anything you can imagine. Dalton is just one link in a much larger plan. There are people more powerful than him controlling everything. You'll never win." Dwayne gritted his teeth, trying to control the boiling anger inside him. He quickly handcuffed Luke with the cuffs Jessica had tossed to him, then rushed to Valor's side. Valor lay on the floor, breathing heavily, his eyes still locked on Dwayne, full of loyalty and absolute trust. Dwayne gently cradled Valor in his arms, pressing his hand against the wound to stop the bleeding, his voice trembling with emotion. "Hang in there, Valor. I won't let you die. Not ever." Jessica quickly moved to call for backup over the radio, her voice firm and clear. "We need medical assistance immediately. Valor is seriously injured. Bring a medical team to the old cabin now." After sending the emergency message, Jessica crouched beside Dwayne, her eyes filled with sympathy and strong resolve. "We'll get through this, Dwayne. Valor will be fine. But we need to understand more about our real enemy. Luke's right about one thing. Dalton and he aren't the whole picture." Dwayne held Valor tightly in his arms, looking up at Jessica with unwavering resolve, his voice low with determination. "We won't stop. I swear I'll find out who's behind all of this. Bitter Creek will never belong to them." In the small, blood-stained, chaotic cabin, Valor let out a soft whine, as if to confirm Dwayne's promise. He bent down and pressed his face into Valor's soft fur, whispering with emotion, "You've saved me so many times, Valor. This time, it's my turn to protect you." And in that painful yet determined moment, Dwayne knew that the battle against the hidden enemy had just entered its most crucial phase. And this time, he wouldn't let anyone else be lost. Dwayne's words of determination still echoed through the small, dim cabin, where the weak light barely illuminated his face, which was filled with worry. Blood from Valor's wound continued to drip, soaking his hands, cold as the fear that gripped Dwayne's heart. The faint, broken breaths of Valor made his heart tighten. The pain was deeper than any wound he had ever suffered. Jessica stood near the cabin door, her hand trembling as she held the radio, trying to stay calm as she spoke clearly and urgently. "Emergency medical team, do you copy? Valor has sustained a severe gunshot wound. We need immediate medical attention. Bring support equipment and the fastest available veterinarian." A weak confirmation came through the radio, but in this situation, every second felt like an eternity. Jessica turned to look at Dwayne, who was crouched down, holding Valor tightly in his arms. Her heart ached at the emotional sight. Dwayne pressed his face into Valor's thick fur, whispering words that were both a desperate plea and filled with hope. "Don't give up, old friend. You've saved me so many times. This time, let me save you, Valor. Please don't leave me alone." Valor's golden eyes slowly opened, his gaze cloudy but still fixed on Dwayne, filled with strength and deep loyalty. It seemed that even in this life-and-death moment, Valor still wanted to tell Dwayne that he had never regretted choosing to protect him. The sound of snowmobile engines reached them from a distance, growing clearer as the medical team finally arrived. Medical personnel rushed into the cabin, their flashlights and urgent voices cutting through the heavy atmosphere. An older veterinarian, calm but focused, knelt down to quickly assess Valor's wound, then looked up at Dwayne with a serious expression. "We need to take Valor to the medical center immediately. The bullet is very close to a major artery and time is running out." Dwayne gently handed Valor over to the medical team, his heart aching as he let go. He stood up, clenching his bloodied hands, his eyes shining with intense determination. "I'm going with him. I won't leave Valor for a minute." Jessica nodded in understanding, quickly helping Dwayne into the rescue vehicle. As the vehicle sped through the snowstorm, she glanced at Luke, who was handcuffed and looking furious, his face twisted with both anger and despair. Jessica walked over to him, her gaze cold but still clear-headed. "Luke, you still have a chance to do the right thing. Who is really behind all of this? Speak up before it's too late." Luke lowered his head, biting his lip, the blind loyalty tearing at him. But finally, he looked up, giving a bitter, disappointed laugh. "You think you can change anything? Whether Valor lives or dies, the plan is still unfolding. Soon enough, you'll all realize that you can't defeat them." Jessica looked at Luke with contempt, then turned and walked briskly out of the cabin, her heart heavy as she thought of Valor and Dwayne. At the medical center, the cold light from the operating room leaked through the door cracks, making the time feel endless. Dwayne stood silently in the hallway, his eyes never leaving the emergency room door, his heart suffocating from the painful weight. Jessica approached him and gently placed her hand on his shoulder, her voice soft but sincere. "Valor will be fine, Dwayne. He's a fighter, and fighters don't give up easily." Dwayne didn't respond, but his eyes said it all. He had never felt so helpless, only able to wait in the suffocating silence. Valor had saved his life so many times, and now Valor's life hung by a thread, and all he could do was pray. Finally, after long hours of tense waiting, the operating room door opened. The doctor stepped forward, removing his mask, his tired eyes hidden behind a small, reassuring smile. "Valor has pulled through. The surgery was difficult, but the bullet was safely removed. He's the most extraordinary dog I've ever met." Dwayne exhaled deeply, feeling a huge weight lift off his shoulders. His body trembled with emotion. He rushed into the emergency room, seeing Valor lying peacefully on the table, his breathing steady and calm. He moved to his side, gently stroking Valor's head, whispering with emotion and gratitude, "You made it, Valor. You never gave up. Thank you for coming back to me." Jessica stood by the door, watching the scene, her eyes filled with emotion as tears involuntarily fell. In that moment, she knew that although the battle ahead was full of danger, as long as they had each other, they would always be strong enough to overcome. Dwayne turned to Jessica, his eyes shining with new resolve, stronger than ever. "Now, we need to end this battle once and for all. The traitors of Bitter Creek will pay, and I will never let anyone hurt my loved ones again." And in that quiet space, as the snowstorm outside began to subside, a new hope, though fragile yet strong, was officially ignited within them, signaling the start of their final, hard-fought battle, one that was filled with meaning and purpose. When the snowstorm finally subsided, making way for the bright dawn light to filter through the snow-covered trees, the story of Dwayne and Valor began to spread more rapidly than ever. The details of their fight against betrayal, corruption, and racial prejudice within Bitter Creek were quickly seized upon by the media, turning them both into symbols of courage and justice. In just a few short days, Bitter Creek, from a small little-known reserve, had become the focal point of the nation. The media surrounded the ranger station, eagerly seeking the latest details. But the most prominent story of all was the emotional one about Valor, the canine who had risked everything to save his partner. When invited to appear on national television, Dwayne hesitated at first. He had never imagined becoming the center of attention, and certainly never thought he would stand before the public to speak about the painful battle he and his colleagues had just endured. But when he saw Valor lying peacefully by his side, the dog's eyes filled with loyalty and absolute trust, Dwayne realized that their story needed to be told, not just to protect Bitter Creek, but to awaken the good values that so many had intentionally forgotten. Before the cameras, Dwayne sat upright, calmly recounting everything with a voice that was powerful yet humble. He didn't shy away from mentioning the painful betrayal by Dalton and those closest to him. He also didn't hide the bitter emotions he felt when recounting the racist remarks he had to endure simply because of the color of his skin. But above all, Dwayne's story always highlighted the image of Valor, a loyal companion who had sacrificed his own safety to protect him and the cause of fairness. He spoke to the entire nation with sincerity from the bottom of his heart. "I never saw myself as a hero. The real hero in this story is Valor. He never knew what racism was. He didn't know what corruption or greed was. Valor only knew how to protect what was right at all costs. If we could learn even a small fraction of that loyalty and courage, this world would be a much better place." His heartfelt words touched the hearts of millions, quickly spreading across social media, becoming a powerful message against injustice, prejudice, and indifference in society. After that emotional interview, Bitter Creek entered a new phase. Under the pressure of public opinion and the media, the government conducted an unprecedented, extensive inspection of the ranger station. Every file and every employee were thoroughly and rigorously reviewed. Those who had stood in the shadows, quietly exploiting their positions for personal gain, were now brought into the light, facing the appropriate consequences. Jessica took charge of this cleansing process, strong and uncompromising in the face of any signs of deceit. She made a clear statement to all the staff. "We've lost the public's trust, but now we have a chance to make things right. From this moment on, Bitter Creek will only be a place for those who truly want to protect justice and nature. There will be no room for discrimination or greed." During this time, Valor recovered quickly, his health gradually stabilizing. Dwayne never left his side, always caring for and encouraging his loyal friend. The image of Dwayne and Valor together became a symbol of loyalty and courage, a living proof that kindness and integrity could always overcome the darkest schemes. Bitter Creek slowly regained the trust of the community. The local people, who had once been skeptical and anxious, now visited the ranger station with eyes full of trust and hope. Many brought small gifts for Valor, showing deep gratitude for the special dog who had become the symbol of the land. One late afternoon, as the sunset bathed the distant mountains in a golden glow, Jessica and Dwayne stood by the office window, looking out at the peaceful scene of Bitter Creek. Both understood that although the recent battle had been difficult and painful, it had also shown them the true strength of trust, unity, and loyalty. Jessica turned to Dwayne, a gentle smile on her face. "You know, Dwayne, you and Valor have changed this place forever. People will never forget what you've done for Bitter Creek." Dwayne looked down at Valor, who was lying peacefully by his feet, the dog's eyes shining under the evening light. He smiled softly, feeling the deep responsibility that life had just given him. "No, Jessica, this place has changed me forever, and Valor has taught me the most important lesson, that no matter how different we are, as long as we have loyalty and courage, we can all become heroes in someone's life." In that quiet and emotional moment, Jessica nodded in agreement, fully understanding that Bitter Creek would now witness a new beginning, where trust and justice would always prevail over the darkness that once cloaked this land. The first warm rays of sunlight after a series of snowstorms finally appeared, gently filtering through the snow-covered pine trees, casting a new promise over the Bitter Creek land. For Dwayne, that light not only symbolized revival, but also served as the clearest proof that good things could be reborn from even the deepest darkness. Just when everything seemed to be returning to normal, an unexpected call from the National K9 Command Center opened a new chapter in his life. They offered Dwayne the leadership of a newly established K9 unit named Echo, a special unit tasked with combating corruption and protecting racial diversity within the nation's wildlife protection forces. At first, Dwayne hesitated. He had never considered himself the right person to lead anyone, never imagined leaving the familiar ranger work he loved. But it was Jessica who encouraged him the most. She walked into his office with a confident smile and unwavering determination, her voice full of encouragement. "Dwayne, you need to understand that this isn't just an opportunity for you. This is your chance to create something much bigger, to change the wrongs we've witnessed. Bitter Creek needs you, but this entire country needs you even more." In the end, as he looked into Jessica's determined eyes and saw Valor by his side, Dwayne knew he couldn't turn down the responsibility. He nodded slowly, his eyes lighting up with a strong sense of resolve. "All right, Jessica, I'll accept, but only if you agree to stay here, by my side. I need you more than ever to help rebuild this place." Jessica smiled confidently, extending her hand to him with sincerity and determination. "I'm not going anywhere. I've just been appointed the new executive director of Bitter Creek. From now on, you'll lead Echo K9, and I'll make sure this place upholds the values of justice we've fought to protect." As the two shook hands, a new, hopeful chapter officially began for Bitter Creek. Valor stood beside them, his gaze bright, as if he too understood the significance of this moment. He lifted his head to look at both of them, his golden eyes shining, as if to say he would always stand by their side, no matter the circumstances. In the following days, the ranger station transformed. Under Jessica's leadership, the station was reorganized with principles of transparency and absolute fairness. New staff were hired not just for their experience and skills, but for their moral values and loyalty to justice and diversity. Echo K9, under Dwayne's direct command, quickly became the most respected unit in the region, handling complex missions with courage and unwavering loyalty. As for Valor, After a full recovery, the dog continued to stand by Dwayne's side, becoming the most living symbol of loyalty and courage for the entire Echo K9 unit. Together, they became an immortal image, reminding everyone that loyalty and friendship were never limited by any barrier, especially not race or skin color. 1 year later, during the anniversary celebration of the Echo K9 unit's formation, Dwayne stood on the podium, addressing hundreds of staff, journalists, and local residents. Valor sat beside him, his strong body poised proudly, his eyes filled with trust. He took a deep breath, his voice powerful and clear, echoing across the vast space, every word carrying a message of strength. We've been through many tough challenges together. We've witnessed betrayal, greed, and injustice right inside the home we've always loved. But now, we have the chance to prove to the world that good things can always prevail, that loyalty, courage, and true friendship are never limited by race or skin color. Dwayne paused, his gaze sweeping over the emotional faces in front of him. From now on, there's no room for discrimination in Bitter Creek. Only loyalty, justice, and friendship that transcends all racial boundaries. That's what Valor taught me, and it's the greatest lesson I want to pass on to all of us. The applause that followed echoed through the space, blending with the emotional cheers of everyone present. Jessica stepped up beside Dwayne, smiling gently, her voice just loud enough for him to hear over the clapping. "We did it, Dwayne. All of this is thanks to your courage and belief." Dwayne turned to look at Jessica, then down at Valor, who was sitting beside his feet, smiling warmly. "It wasn't just me, Jessica. It's thanks to all of us, and especially Valor, my friend who taught me the true meaning of friendship and loyalty." In that peaceful, emotional moment, Jessica nodded in agreement, fully understanding that Bitter Creek was now entering a new era, a place where trust and justice would always triumph over the darkness that had once covered the land. And so, the touching story of Ranger Dwayne Harris and his K9 dog Valor came to an end, a living proof that true friendship and loyalty can overcome all barriers, even discrimination and corruption. What do you think made Valor such a special companion to Dwayne? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, share this meaningful story with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel to follow more inspiring stories. Thank you for being with us. See you in the next video.